The forest was silent, except for the crunch of her boots on the damp leaves. The sun had just started to sink, painting the sky with streaks of orange and grey. She hadn't planned to come here alone, but something about this place, this strange patch of land she had inherited from her late husband, pulled her closer every day. Locals said it was haunted, that there were things buried beneath the soil no one had ever dared to uncover. But she didn't believe in ghost stories. She believed in answers. The inheritance papers called it unused forest acreage. Just a few acres of trees and moss-covered ground that stretched endlessly behind her small cottage. But the deeper she walked, the less it looked like any forest she'd ever seen. The trees grew in perfect lines, too straight, as if planted by hand. The air grew colder, heavier, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear a faint metallic echo, a sound that didn't belong in nature. "Mama, look what I found." Her daughter's voice cut through the stillness, high and excited. The woman turned sharply, her heart skipping a beat. Her little girl stood a few steps ahead, pointing at something half buried in the mud. It was dark, long, and covered in moss. At first, she thought it was just a fallen tree trunk, but then she saw the smooth curve of metal, the faint outline of a window. She knelt beside it, brushing away layers of wet soil with her sleeve. The surface was rusted, cold, and strange symbols were faintly carved into the side. It wasn't a rock or a pipe. It was a wall, a metal wall. She followed its curve with her fingers until she realized what she was touching. It wasn't just a wall. It was part of something much bigger. Her breath caught as she stepped back. Through the tangled vines and dirt, the shape became clearer. A door. A train door. Hidden underground. She stared, frozen. A forgotten train buried in the middle of the forest, on land that supposedly had never been touched. She leaned closer, running her hands along the rusted surface. The cold metal bit at her fingertips, and as she brushed away another layer of dirt, the outline of a faded emblem appeared, a circular insignia with letters she couldn't quite read. Her daughter stood beside her, eyes wide with curiosity. "What is it, Mama?" she whispered. The woman didn't answer. She was too stunned to speak. The forest around them was eerily quiet. Not a single bird called. Not a breeze stirred the leaves. It was as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting for her next move. She pressed harder against the metal door. It gave off a hollow sound. Something was inside. She stepped back, scanning the ground. The earth around the structure was uneven, cracked like something underneath had shifted long ago. It looked like the back half of a train car buried deep into the ground. Vines hung from the trees above it like curtains, and moss covered what little remained visible. The deeper she scraped, the clearer it became. This wasn't some old piece of machinery left to rot. It was a full train carriage. But there were no tracks, no signs of a rail line ever passing through here. The nearest railway was miles away. "Go stand by the path," she told her daughter softly. The little girl hesitated, then nodded and stepped back, watching her mother with wide, anxious eyes. The woman turned to the door again. Her heart was racing, but she needed to see what was inside. With a sharp tug, she pulled at the rusted handle. It didn't budge. She tried again, this time harder, the old hinges groaning in protest. Finally, with a loud crack, it gave way. A gust of air rushed out, cold, dry, and metallic. It smelled like dust and something else she couldn't name. She shined her flashlight into the darkness, but the beam barely cut through the thick layer of fog swirling inside. Dust particles glimmered in the light like tiny floating ghosts. Slowly, she climbed in. The floor creaked beneath her feet, metal bending with each cautious step. The air inside was stale. The seats, what was left of them, were torn and decayed. The walls were covered in grime, but under the dirt, faint markings and numbers were still visible. It was like stepping into another time, frozen and forgotten. She moved down the narrow aisle, brushing her hand against the wall for balance. Her flashlight flickered across rows of old seats, shattered glass, and something strange, a row of leather straps bolted to the floor. Her brow furrowed. Trains didn't have those. Not for passengers, at least. She crouched down, running her hand along one of the straps. It was stiff, old, but still strong. A chill ran down her spine. This wasn't a passenger car. Whatever had been transported here wasn't meant to move freely. A loud clang echoed behind her. She spun around, the flashlight shaking in her hand. Her daughter's voice called from outside, "Mama." Her breath came fast. "Stay there, sweetheart," she shouted. The silence that followed felt too long, too heavy. She took a step back toward the door, her beam landing on the far end of the carriage. There, in the shadows, something gleamed faintly. A box. Wooden, small, and perfectly square, resting on one of the metal benches. It looked untouched, as if someone had placed it there deliberately. She moved closer, her pulse quickening with every step. The box was carved with strange symbols, the same ones she had seen faintly etched on the outside wall. She brushed off the dust. It was sealed with a thin strip of brass, worn but still intact. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. The weight surprised her, heavier than it looked. She turned it over in her hands, searching for a latch or a keyhole. There was nothing. But as she ran her thumb along one of the carvings, the surface shifted slightly, like something underneath had responded to her touch. A faint sound filled the carriage, low, distant, almost like a hum. She froze. The air thickened again, pressing against her chest. From outside, her daughter's voice trembled. "Mama, someone's standing by the trees." Her heart stopped. She turned toward the doorway, gripping the box tightly. The flashlight beam wavered over the forest beyond. And there, just beyond the trees, she saw a shadow. Tall. Still. Watching. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She blinked, trying to focus, but the beam of her flashlight trembled in her unsteady hand. The shadow didn't move. It just stood there at the edge of the trees, half hidden by the fog that was slowly creeping closer to the train. Her daughter clutched the doorframe, her small voice trembling. "Mama, who is that?" The woman's throat felt dry. "Stay where you are," she whispered, though her own voice shook. She aimed the flashlight directly at the figure, but the beam scattered uselessly through the mist. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw a face, pale, faintly lit, but when she blinked, it was gone. Only the outline of something tall remained. She blinked again, and suddenly there was nothing. Empty forest. Silence. The shadow had vanished. Her breath came in short bursts. She turned back to her daughter. "Come inside," she said quickly. "Now." The little girl obeyed, climbing into the train as the woman pulled her close. "Stay beside me and don't touch anything." She set the strange wooden box down on one of the metal benches. It hummed softly, almost like it was alive. The carvings along its surface shimmered faintly under the weak light. Her hands itched to open it, but she hesitated. Something about it felt wrong, like it didn't belong to this world, like it wasn't meant to be found. The train groaned suddenly, the metal echoing through the carriage. Dust drifted down from the ceiling, and the air grew colder. She gripped her daughter's shoulder. "We are leaving," she whispered. She turned toward the door, but before she could reach it, her flashlight flickered and died. The darkness was instant and heavy, swallowing everything. Her daughter whimpered. "Mama." She fumbled for her phone, trying to turn on the screen light. When it finally glowed, she froze. The box was open. Her stomach dropped. She was sure she hadn't touched it. She took a slow step forward, her phone trembling in her grip. Inside the box lay a handful of small objects, thin metal discs, tarnished and scratched. They looked like coins, but each had strange patterns engraved on both sides. In the center of the pile was a piece of paper folded neatly, its edges browned with age. She reached for it, her hand shaking. The paper felt brittle, ready to crumble, but the ink was still clear enough to read. Just 6 words, written in hurried, uneven handwriting. Asterisk they never left. "Don't stay long." Asterisk the air turned colder still. Her breath came out in visible puffs. Somewhere deep in the carriage, something creaked, slow, deliberate, like footsteps on old metal. She spun around, shining her phone's light toward the sound. The aisle was empty. The seats were still. But she could hear it, the faint scrape of movement, closer this time. She backed up, pulling her daughter behind her. The sound stopped. The only thing she could hear was the wind outside, faint and distant. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "We are getting out of here," she said under her breath. She grabbed the wooden box, shoving the paper back inside. As she turned toward the exit, something brushed past her shoulder, soft but cold. She gasped and spun around, her light sweeping across the walls. For a moment, she saw them. Shapes. Dozens of them, faint, half-transparent. Faces pressed against the windows, watching from the other side. Her daughter screamed, and the lights, The faint glow from outside flickered like lightning. The shapes were gone as quickly as they appeared, leaving behind only fog seeping through the cracks. She clutched her daughter tight, stumbling toward the door. When they stepped outside, the air felt lighter but colder, as if the forest itself had been holding its breath. They ran. Through the trees, through the silence, until the faint outline of the farmhouse appeared in the distance. Only when she slammed the door behind them did she finally let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking, and her daughter clung to her side, crying softly. The wooden box sat on the table between them, still humming quietly. She stared at it for a long time, her pulse slowly calming, until she noticed something new. The brass lock had reappeared, sealing the lid shut once again. And this time, etched faintly across the top, were words she hadn't seen before. Asterisk, return what isn't yours. Asterisk, the house felt colder that night. The kind of cold that seeps through walls and into your bones, where no blanket or fire can reach. The wind outside had died down, but the silence was worse. Every creak of the floor sounded too sharp. Every whisper of the trees outside felt like a voice trying to get in. She sat at the table with the box in front of her, the brass lettering faintly glinting under the kitchen light. Her daughter had finally fallen asleep upstairs, but even that brought no comfort. The box no longer hummed. It just sat there, still, heavy, and waiting. The words etched into the lid seemed to pulse faintly, as though they weren't carved but alive, shifting slightly when she wasn't looking. Asterisk, return what isn't yours. Asterisk, she stared at the message, her mind racing. Return it where? To the forest? To the train? And what did it mean? What isn't yours? She thought back to the paper she'd read earlier, the one that said, asterisk, they never left. Asterisk, who were asterisk, they asterisk. Her husband had mentioned strange things about the forest once, just before he died. A story his grandfather told him, about a hidden railway line that was never built, about something buried that should have never moved. She hadn't believed him then. She wished she had now. The lights flickered once. Then again. Her breath caught. She looked toward the hallway. Nothing. But the air had changed, colder, heavier, like before. The faint hum returned, so low she almost felt it more than heard it. It was coming from the box again. She reached for it, hesitating. The moment her fingers touched the lid, the light above her went out. The house fell into darkness. Her chair scraped back, her heart pounding. She fumbled for her phone, using its dim glow to see. The box was open again. Her breath froze. She hadn't lifted the lid. She was sure of it. Inside, something was different. The coins, or discs, were gone. In their place lay a single object, a small metal tag attached to a broken chain. She leaned closer, bringing the light near it. The tag was engraved with numbers, and a name. Her husband's. She stumbled back, the chair crashing behind her. The air thickened, the hum deepening into a faint, rhythmic pulse. The shadows along the walls began to move, stretching like smoke. She could hear faint whispers now, overlapping voices speaking too softly to understand. Her phone screen flickered, the light dimming as if something was draining it. From upstairs came the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Her blood ran cold. Her daughter was too small to make footsteps like that. Emma, she called, her voice cracking. No answer. The steps stopped. Then, faintly, a door creaked open. She gripped the edge of the table, her mind racing. Stay calm, she whispered to herself, forcing air into her lungs. Stay calm. She took the flashlight from the counter and slowly made her way up the stairs, each step creaking under her weight. The hall at the top was dark. The only light came from her daughter's open bedroom door, a faint, flickering glow, as if from a candle. She reached the doorway and froze. The wooden box was sitting on the floor beside her daughter's bed. It shouldn't have been there. She'd left it downstairs. Her daughter was still asleep, breathing softly. But the box's lid was open again, the faint golden light spilling out. Inside, the tag with her husband's name glowed faintly, and next to it lay something new, a photograph. Her hand shook as she picked it up. It was old, the edges torn and faded. The picture showed a group of men standing beside the same train buried in the forest, but this time, it wasn't overgrown or rusted. It was new, freshly painted. And standing among the men was someone she recognized. Her husband. Her chest tightened. The date written on the back was from decades before he was even born. She stumbled backward, nearly dropping the photo. Behind her, the floor creaked again, one step, then another. She turned, raising her flashlight toward the sound. The light trembled across the hallway. At the far end stood a figure. Still. Watching. Its outline flickered faintly, like a shadow trying to form into something solid. She tried to speak, but no words came out. The light flickered, and for just a second, she saw the face. It was her husband's. Pale. Empty-eyed. She blinked, and he was gone. The only thing left was the sound of the box closing itself, the lid snapping shut with a hollow click that echoed through the house. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably as she ran down the stairs, the flashlight beam jumping wildly across the walls. The photo was still clutched in her hand, its edges cutting into her fingers. She stumbled into the kitchen, breathing hard, trying to steady herself. The box sat on the table again, exactly where it had been before, closed, silent, untouched. Her mind raced. She knew she hadn't brought it back down. Her chest heaved as she backed away. The air in the house was colder now, almost icy. Her breath came out in visible clouds. Every sound, the ticking clock, the creak of the old wood, felt amplified, echoing through the emptiness. She turned in a slow circle, scanning every corner, every shadow. Nothing moved. But the feeling of being watched was unbearable. Then, faintly, she heard humming. A soft, familiar melody. Her stomach turned. It was the lullaby her husband used to hum to their daughter before bed. The sound floated down the stairs, gentle and haunting. "Emma," she whispered. She ran to the base of the stairs and called up, "Emma, wake up, sweetheart." No answer. Only the tune, slow and deliberate, drifting through the air. She sprinted up the steps, two at a time. Her daughter's room was empty. The bed was neatly made, as if she had never been there. Panic rose in her throat. "Emma," she shouted again, her voice breaking. The humming stopped. Then she heard it, the creak of the barn door outside. Her pulse spiked. She turned toward the window, and through the thick fog, she could see a faint light coming from the barn. The same light she'd seen inside the train. That same golden, pulsing glow. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and flashlight and ran outside, her boots sinking into the damp earth. The air was heavy and still, the fog clinging to her like a second skin. As she neared the barn, she could hear something moving inside, the faint scrape of metal, the rhythm of breathing that wasn't hers. She pushed the door open slowly, the hinges groaning. The golden light flooded out, washing over the trees. It was coming from the open hatch in the floor, the one that led down into the earth. She froze at the threshold. The box was there again, sitting at the top of the stairs, humming softly. Next to it stood her daughter, barefoot, staring down into the hole. "Emma," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Come to me, honey. Step away from there." Her daughter didn't move. She spoke in a soft voice that didn't sound like her own. "He said it's almost ready." The woman's heart stopped. Who said that? Emma turned slightly, her eyes reflecting the golden light. "Papa." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "Sweetheart, that's not your papa." But Emma only smiled faintly and looked back into the pit. The light below flickered faster now, pulsing like a heartbeat. A faint vibration spread through the floorboards. The woman dropped the flashlight and rushed forward, grabbing her daughter's hand. "We are leaving," she said firmly, pulling her close. The hum deepened, louder, angrier. The box rattled violently, the brass lettering glowing red. The ground trembled. From the hatch below came a rush of air, hot, heavy, and filled with the sound of whispers, dozens of voices blending into one. She stumbled backward, clutching Emma to her chest. The wind tore through the barn, scattering hay and dust. The wooden hatch burst open wider, and a shape began to rise, faint, shifting, like smoke taking form. It wasn't human, not completely. Limbs stretched, bending wrong, faces flickering in and out of existence. She screamed, shielding her daughter's eyes. The voices grew louder, overlapping, desperate. Among them, she could hear her husband's voice, clear and pained. "Run." She didn't hesitate. She grabbed Emma's hand and bolted toward the door. The moment they stepped outside, the wind stopped. The light cut off instantly. The barn fell silent. She turned around. The door was swinging gently on its hinges. The glow inside was gone, replaced by darkness so thick it swallowed the last of the fog. The box was nowhere in sight. Her daughter's small hand trembled in hers. "Mama," she whispered, "are we safe now?" The woman looked at her, struggling to answer. Behind them, through the mist, came a faint metallic sound, a train horn, low and distant, echoing through the forest where no tracks had existed for decades.